Imagine we find a table, an unusual one, and we don't know what it's for. It's so weird. So what do? We get out our tools. Firstly, we measure it, we scan it, we figure out how it was made, right? Come up with our best guess. And then we form a theory about what its purpose is. We debate, we philosophize. And imagine after all that, the person who made it comes in and tells us exactly how he did it and what it's for. Now, whatever he says is obviously the truth. Whatever we came up with, regardless of whether it agrees with him or not, is not as good as what he has to say. And anybody who'd argue with him would be a fool. This is to illustrate the difference between Torah and science. Science, for all of its greatness, and don't get me wrong, it's done a great job, attempts to understand the world from the bottom up by looking at the world and trying to figure it out through observing, measuring, theorizing, experimenting. Torah is top down. It's the architect of the world himself telling us what it's all about. So if Torah says something that contradicts science, it's the height of arrogance and foolishness to say that it's the Torah that must be wrong. Now, this is especially true of the Kabbalah, the Torah that is literally received, mikabel, from Hashem. Still, some people feel compelled to apologize for the Torah, especially when it appears to contradict science. They might say that the Torah is being metaphorical, not literally true, or that the Chachamim was simply using the scientific knowledge of their day, and you can't really blame them. And that's acceptable because their job is to deal with the spiritual. The Torah's job is spiritual, right? We've heard these excuses, but I think, especially maybe people who like my channel, know better. We are not embarrassed by the Torah, and we revere our Tzaddikim. They possess flawless character and Ruach HaKodesh. If they or the Torah describe something about the physical world that conflicts with science, then it must be the science that's mistaken, right? Not the Torah. Let's look at some modern examples that show how those who once apologized for the Torah never needed to in the first place. And before I do that, I just want to give a quick story from my friend because it's very similar. He taught in a non-Jewish, rather rough inner city school. And he was a frum Jew. He wore the white shirt, the tzitzit peyot. Everybody knew he was Jewish and religious. And they teased him, but I think they respected him overall. One time in his class, a girl stood up and she said, I thought that the Torah and the Jews are supposed to be moral. But I was in Stamford Hill one time in a bakery, queuing up in a long queue, and some Orthodox Jewish man just walks in and brazenly goes to the front of the queue. What's up with that? So many people in that situation would instinctively apologize for this, but my friend didn't. He said that, no, it's not possible. A Torah true Jew would never do something like that. And she said, well, I saw it and I know it happened. And he said, well, you can't have done because it's just impossible. So she pushed again and he didn't back down, and it went back and forth a few times until eventually she admitted that she made the whole thing up. True story, it's what happened to my friend. So in our case too, we don't need to apologize for the Torah to science either, despite how things may feel or look. And today, after a long wait, it's science that's catching up. So for example, we all know that in the Torah, the heart is the seat of thought and emotion. Now, for a long time, science disagreed, and it said that these only happen in the brain. Now, we've discovered that the heart actually contains about 40,000 neurons, forming a kind of mini-brain in its little nervous system, right? This network connects to the brain's limbic system through the medulla oblongata in the brainstem and plays a role in emotional tone and regulation. Now, this is particularly striking because of what we say every day, v'ten belibenu bina, place bina, understanding, in our hearts. Now, the Kabbalah says that the bina is housed in the left part of the brain, and chokhmah is housed in the right part of the brain, and da'at is at the back. This has famously been confirmed for a long time now by brain imaging, that abstract thought and creativity, which is chokhmah, reside in the right hemisphere of the brain. And this gets mapped by the analytical, methodical, understanding side of the brain, the left side of the brain, the left hemisphere, which is bina. The analytical understanding of the brain, the bina, that maps the right side, is in the left hemisphere, which is the side that plays, by the way, the predominant role in the heart's activity and function and regulation. So 10 bilibinu bina. The heart receives from the bina through the 49 gates. And the Alter Rebbe says in this week's parasha in Likutei Torah Pinchas that when we contemplate Hashem, this very contemplation itself goes into the heart and itself becomes the emotional experience that comes from the contemplation. And he says there that only a tiny, tiny fraction of this intellectual energy is converted into emotion. Because if the entirety of our contemplation of Hashem's greatness were to be felt in the heart, our heart would not be able to contain it. So when we use our brain, we are actually using approximately a few 100 trillion neural connections from our 100 billion or so neurons. Now, our heart's little brain, on the other hand, only has a few 100,000 neural connections. So we can actually calculate the ratio. This means that the small fraction of our intellectual energy going into our emotions is approximately a millionth. So the Rebbe was not exaggerating. Now, in the Rebbe's Maimah, he explains that our tefillot corresponds to the korbanot, and he talks particularly about the korban tamid. Every part of the animal, except the skin and the wool, the superficial, the innards, the fat, the blood, the sinews, the bones, the flesh, were burned on the altar, the mizbeach. To explain how this corresponds to prayer, he needs to explain some human anatomy. So, by the way, this can't just be the science of the time. If the apologists were to say what they say, it would actually destroy the lesson. It's central to the lesson that he gets this right. And he writes that the bones originate from the brain and flesh originates from the blood. Does this contradict what you learned in school? Probably. But cutting-edge science, advanced biology, confirms it. Bone growth is, firstly, it's regulated by the brain's hypothalamus. And secondly, and even more importantly, the skull bones, the jaw, the facial bones, they actually develop from neural crest cells, which are the same cells that also develop into the brain. Okay, so the brain has the power of bone. The flesh, the muscles, develop from the same mesodermal cells as the blood, so that's also true. And they also grow from the vitality that the blood provides, so they are made from the blood. Now, the lesson from the Maimah is this. Our blood is inherently linked to our soul. The lowest and most physical part of our soul interfaces and actually blurs itself with the most lofty spiritual aspect of our body, the heat of our blood. Hadam hu hanefesh. Now, it's this heating and movement of the blood in the heart that stirs the animalistic emotions, the base ones, the lust, that jealousy, the anger that we're born with. The Kabbalah teaches us also that we have a nefesh elokit, and this has emotions too, but only pure and holy emotions which come from contemplating Hashem and His greatness. That's what the nefesh elokit does all day. She yearns for Hashem deeply from this contemplation. Our task, therefore, during tefillah, is to, in our physical brain, where our nefesh elokit resides, contemplate Hashem's greatness. This contemplation, we have to do it as best we can, not fleeting and temporary. We need to fix it in our da'at, which is the aspect of our brain that corresponds to bones. The brain has the power of bones, like we said. Why? Because it means it becomes a fixed feature of our intellect. It doesn't go away. Even when we're not thinking about it, it's there at the back of the brain. In our bones, we feel it. Just like you feel your loved ones always, even when you're not even thinking about them. They are like the context of your life. You're always aware of their presence indirectly, and everything you do is for them, in context of them. That is kol atzmotai tomana. All my bones yearn for you, Hashem. So when this intellectual activity is crystallized in our da'at, it leads to great, deep, and true emotions. A strong yearning for Hashem, for example, in our tefillot. This is passed to our heart through our brainstem, through the sinews, from the bina, and there it literally, physically refines the blood itself, so that this blood no longer arouses animal passions, but instead pulses with ahavat Hashem and yirat Hashem. The passionate energy of the Yetzer Hara itself is transformed into a force for good, an ahava azah, a passionate love for Hashem, which is in some ways greater than the love of the nefesh elokit itself. So this is the true Yerida L'Sorach Aliyah. That is why all of the parts of the innards of the Korban Tamid are burned. The blood, the bones, the sinews, the flesh, the fat. Because all of it must be given to Hashem. That corresponds to your blood, your bones, your innards. In your tefillah, literally, you must give it all to Hashem. And it becomes Ishay Yisrael Utfilatam. Literally. Why am I teaching you all this? Not to prove Torah with science, chas v'shalom. Who cares what science thinks of Torah? I'm also not here to teach you or impress upon you the greatness of Chazal and our Torah. You already know this. The reason I'm teaching you this is to give you some chizuk. Sometimes, especially after all our apologizing, we imagine that these lessons about how tefillah and mitzvot transform us is something that's happening in a mystical way, in a distant world, metaphorical, far away, in Shemayim, whatever, in spirituality. But actually, that's a mistake. The Nefesh Elokit is here in our body, refining our Nefesh Bahamit through our body, mamash in the physical realm, through our physicality, our blood. It's a fusion of spirituality and physicality that's truly wondrous. Or mafli la'asot, right? Hashem is mafli la'asot. And all of this yearning that comes from Nefesh Elokit is being transmitted through our very brain, our bones, our sinews, and our blood, until our actual flesh itself becomes holy and worthy of Olam Haba. And this is Hashem's true purpose, Sorech Gavoa. This is what He wants. He wants our bodies, our Nefesh Bahamit, to go to Olam Haba, right? And it's also the greatest good that He can give us too. So when we daven with kavanah, we're not merely fulfilling a duty. We're transforming ourselves physically and spiritually, literally, happening in our very bodies, our very flesh and blood. By doing so, we're tangibly fulfilling our purpose and Hashem's plan here in this world. It's not a metaphor, it's not a nice, cute lesson, but it's literally, tangibly true. And therefore, our tefillot should get tangibly better, right? We should be inspired in a real way, in the same way that we're inspired to look after our health. Our tefillot are looking after our health physically. Baruch Hashem that He gave us His Torah, including the teachings of anatomy, and our holy tzaddikim to teach it all to us so that it can make a difference to our prayer. And I hope that that's what you received from this video too. Shabbat Shalom.